Making sure we are adequately and properly communicating with the public. And to assist us in your role and assist us in getting information out, we would like to establish regular press conferences. You'll be getting more information about that. So this is the initial one. This also, however, is a special one in that we do have an announcement to make. And so at this point, I'd like to call upon Police Chief Bill Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Bonaparte. As a former homicide investigator, a career law enforcement officer, and a father, I am keenly aware of the emotions associated with this tragic death of a child. I'm also aware that my role as the leader of this agency has become a distraction from the investigation. While I stand by the Stanford Police Department, its personnel, and the investigation that was conducted in regards to the Trayvon Martin case, it is apparent that my involvement in this matter is overshadowing the process. Therefore, I have come to the decision that I must temporarily remove myself from the position as police chief for the city of Stanford. I do this in the hopes of restoring some semblance of calm to the city, which has been in turmoil for several weeks. As the chief of police of the city of Stanford, I have made sure that the facts of this case have been presented to the Office of the State Attorney. It is my hope the investigation process will move forward swiftly and appropriately through the justice system, and that a final determination in this case is reached. Thank you.
Yes, sir, that is not. Why did it take so long to start the investigation?
In the interim, Police Captains Scott and O'Connor will assume the co-duties running the Stanford Police Department while we look for an interim police chief. This is a very difficult time for this community. It's a very difficult time for our nation. This incident has gathered international attention. I ask that the citizens, both of Stanford and of the country, understand that the judicial process has been in place. What the city of Stanford wants more than anything else for the Trayvon Martin family is justice. It's been turned over to the state's attorney's office. The governor has asked the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to assist. Mayor Triplett, Congresswoman Brown have joined and gotten the United States Department of Justice to be part of this process. So we are looking for a complete, thorough review and that justice will prevail. At this point, I'd just like to thank you. We'll be getting a scheduled regular press conference. Thank you.
What does temporarily mean? What does it mean temporarily remove himself?
That was a live press conference from Stanford, Florida, where the police chief, Bill Lee Jr., actually just announced that he's going to temporarily step down. Earlier today, he got a vote of no confidence, potentially, I guess, trying to head off the further criticism, saying himself that he didn't want to be a distraction. We're going to talk a little bit more about this. Joining us now live from Stanford, Florida, Joyanne Reed, who's managing editor of thegrio.com and an MSNBC contributor, and Clint Van Zandt, a former FBI profiler and NBC analyst. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
So, Joyanne, big news here coming out of Stanford, Florida, with Bill Lee stepping down temporarily. I mean, was that expected based on what you're hearing?
Well, I mean, I think that we were moving in the direction of Bill Lee being removed or stepping down on his own. I mean, you have to understand that the pressure on the city manager, who really is the only person who had the authority to remove Bill Lee, the vote of no confidence that took place yesterday was merely symbolic, but I think it was emblematic of an eroding lack of confidence, not just in Lee, but in the department. I mean, keep in mind, he is the third sheriff that Stanford has had in 3 years. The previous sheriff stepped down because of a controversy over another case in which a lieutenant's son beat up a homeless man and then was not arrested by Stanford police. Then you had the interim sheriff that followed him step down because he disclosed that there was an internal affairs investigation about the first case. So Lee is actually the guy who was brought in to try and clean this up and heal relationships with the community, and he'd begun to do that when this happened. So I think that he was moving towards probable removal, and this was probably a face-saving move ahead of that.
So, Clint, here's a question for you. I noticed, I think it's very noticeable that this was, he mentioned a temporary stepping down, stepping aside, if you will. As part of the FBI investigation, they're obviously going to be looking at how the police conducted their case. But could that, pending their investigation, could that mean a permanent stepping down, if you will, a resignation for Bill Lee?
Well, yeah, the FBI won't make any recommendation concerning the police chief and whether he should keep his job or not. In fact, I think we need to understand when the FBI comes in, the federal government comes in, their latitude to, let's say, entertain any type of federal prosecution is somewhat limited. Now, the audio tapes and 911 tapes are going to be important because they're going to have to show some type of frame of mind on the shooter that this was a hate crime, that this was a racial crime. If not, this is not a federal crime. This stays in local jurisdiction. I think the FBI is there, number one, because they should be there to do this independent investigation. Number two, it's kind of a calming measure that this community, after a month, really deserves. And I think part of this calming measure is for the police chief to step aside and likely step down in the near future.
So, Joyanne, it seemed to me that part of what added to the pressure, frankly, on this police chief and the city manager, I don't know if you saw the interview last night with Trayvon's parents and Reverend Al, the picture that's emerging of this young man as a hero who actually saved his father's life when he was just 9 years old. I have to imagine that added to the pressure. I have to imagine that adds to the emotion. What do we expect on the ground tonight?
Well, I mean, I think, and you make a really great point, particularly as compared to Mr. Zimmerman. I mean, George Zimmerman is a man who did have a criminal record. He had been arrested in the past in 2005 for battery on a law enforcement officer. He is someone who, at least is being portrayed now in the media, as someone who was really looking for trouble, who was out there armed, walking around, looking for people that he thought were related to recent break-ins. And so I think because he is also hidden and is not talking, and really there aren't very many people speaking on his behalf, we're seeing these emerging divergent pictures of Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman, and that's adding, I think, to the anger. And I mean, I think you also can't underestimate just the pain that this community has been going in for a long time. Sure. The police department, their relationship with the African-American community was not just harmed by this. This was the culmination of at least 2 years of systematic problems. And, of course, there was the fact that two of the officers who were on the scene at the Trayvon Martin shooting were also on the scene of this previous case, the Collison case 2 years ago, when once again police made a decision on the ground not to arrest someone who, in this case, had a relationship to police.
Clint, Joyanne brings up a really important point, and it's something that I've been thinking about and wondering about with regard to the FBI. I mean, there are so many missteps clearly in this case, and as Joyanne said, it's not just this case. There's been a culmination of the way African Americans feel they've been treated in this community. Is that not something that the FBI will also look into?
I think it's something they have to look into, but again, we have to say, is that something that the federal government, the Department of Justice, could really prosecute? There's a lot of facts and wrong facts flying around. Mr. Zimmerman's parents confirmed that he is a Latino, not a white, so we have to make sure that the world understands, if in fact they're painting this as black and white, that this is black and brown as far as the family is concerned. Now, that doesn't make any difference as far as this young man being dead. But, Matt Lauer brought up a good point this morning, too, on the Today Show, when he said this guy, Zimmerman, the shooter, has, in fact, since the first of the year, made over 40 calls to police in his self-assumed role as some type of neighborhood patrol officer. But Matt also pointed out that this is the first incident where there's been any confrontation. And I think that's what the FBI has to look for, is why in this particular case this confrontation took place and who's responsible.
All right, Joyanne Reed and Clint Van Zandt, thank you both again. And again, repeating, if you're just joining us, breaking news, the police chief in Stanford, Florida has just announced that he'll temporarily step aside as the shooting death of Trayvon Martin is investigated. Stay with us.